Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about how to handle our emotions in these tumultuous lives, and just generally talk about how we're supposed to deal with our emotions in trials and tribulations. And the title of the message here is "Crucify Him." And you can probably guess where I'm going with this, but around about the second to the last slide, I'm going to touch on some emotions about the crucifixion. But the reason I'm talking about this today is because in general, there are so many stressful events that are going on in our society. For those of us in the West, we have had about 30 years of general goodness, like wealth and prosperity. And in the country, the West is the West in general. If you include Canada, Europe, Australia, and the developed Latin American nations, is in the most volatile condition I can remember in my almost 50 years of living. Um, we actually have a war, a protracted ground war in Europe. Right now. This is very, very strange. Growing up at the tail end of the Cold War, any type of altercation between the West and Russia was thought to bring in nuclear holocausts. And it was a very terrifying time back then. It didn't happen, praise Yahweh. But today we actually have a shooting war going on with Russia, and finding out that Russia is not nearly as powerful that we thought. Praise Yahweh again. But to have an actual war going on in Europe with Ukraine, a country that provides an enormous amount of food to North Africa and large parts of the world, and that Ukraine is very similar to the Midwest of the United States as far as crop production. This could be a very bad time for us in the whole world, because even if the grain doesn't get to some other continent, it's still going to cause our stuff to go up in price and cost and scarcity. Um, Supply chain issues in general since the COVID-19, even before COVID, I think that the companies have run these really thin supply chains where we depend upon ship transport for a lot of stuff. And here in the United States, we are accustomed to having everything and anything that we want at the drop of a hat. And that has provided for hundreds of millions of people to have good livelihoods and to have, good quality of life for a long time. But, we starting to go to the store and see things be not there is very unusual. My last year, I think year before, my sump pump broke and I needed to get a new sump pump and some PVC fittings, and I went to the home store, and sure enough, there are barely any pumps. I think I ultimately had to order the pump online, I think. But the fittings, the inch and a half PVC fittings that should be very inexpensive and plentiful, just simply were not there. I had to kind of jury rig the thing together. I got it running, but it was a wake up call to realize just how spoiled we are over here. That here in Kansas City, which is a good solid Midwestern city, it's of a good size. We're accustomed to having, you know, parts and things just at the drop of a hat, and there they were. They weren't there, which is a little unnerving, because then you start overbuying things. You start overbuying things, which hurts the supply chain even more, because you don't want to be caught without. You know, a sump pump is, for those who don't live in the Midwest or places with sump pumps, our houses are dug into the ground and have basements, and so all the rainwater has to be brought into the house and pumped away from the house to protect the foundation. So there's actually a reservoir inside my basement where tubes bring water into it, and there's a pump that pumps it out, and then I have another piece of pipe that takes it out to the ditch. So if that sump pump fails, you could end up with a flooded house, a flooded basement, and all sorts of damages and stuff. So it's quite a big worry that you have one of these things that works all the time. We just entered into a recession with millions of jobs unfilled. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That there are tens of millions of Americans who are not working and magically sustaining themselves with tens of millions of jobs unfilled. This is a strange time. We've seen recessions before, which go hand in hand with unemployment and people hurting. But if you are an able-bodied person right now, you can get a job making upwards of $20 an hour in any general labor facility with full benefits. But there are people who are choosing not to do that. It's very, very strange, very strange. This inflation, the cost of energy, is going through the roof, which is really going to hurt our retirees and the people who are going into retirement, as well as the cost of basically everything going up about 10% a quarter. It's a very stressful time to be alive. The financial markets are in a state of flux where bad news comes out and the stock market goes up. Good news comes out, the stock market comes down. It's a very strange time to be alive. But then we take all these things and we add in all of this push to basically decimate any type of traditional family values. And now we're at the point now where they're going to actually try to change language to get rid of gendered pronouns. Because of why? I have no idea. But this is really a difficult time to be alive because at your places of work, your companies are adopting these policies that are literally impossible to follow. And I even know a person who lost their job because they accidentally misgendered somebody by reading their name off of a roster 3 or 4 times when the name was proper. So it's very this is all going to come apart at the seams, but the stress that's causing us, that's acting on us, is turning into violence. Our society is incredibly violent against each other with these full-blown riots we saw in the streets a few years ago, where the police were supposedly at fault for the hooligans rioting, and we see these mass shootings on the rise. We see people using drugs that are so powerful that they could kill an elephant and dying on them. We call it a drug overdose, but this fentanyl is so powerful that any dose of it is hazard. It's actually poison. And these horrific crimes that come to light, the world is so mixed up these days, and I've just scratched the surface. Um, and it's causing us to have emotions and stress and strain, and it's normal. Because if you are a God-fearing person, you should not like what is happening to the West. This is not normal. And if we think about our own lives, last week at the assembly, we had this prayer list was the longest in memory. And by memory, I mean the longest, prayer list that I've seen in 15 years. And it was all about things that are happening to individuals in our assembly. A lot of times we have a long prayer list because we're thinking about our brothers and sisters who are far off, and we're all coming together as we should. But these things were very tangible. We have one sister who's been going through her own medical trials for many years, cancer and all kinds of things. And then her husband, who they'd been estranged for years, her husband passes away. They're in their mid 40s, and it turns out her husband was terminally ill, and he came back into her life so he could end his life properly with his wife as he should, and he didn't tell her. Um, that roller coaster right there of emotions is something that you know how a person gets through something that traumatic is very um, difficult to understand. And I just think that that's just one example, one anonymous example of things that are happening in everybody's lives right now. In my own struggles, I had you know I just changed jobs, which I should have done a long time ago, realizing that the work environment that I was in was for many years was incredibly unhealthy. And the moment I separated from it, so much stress left my life. And now I've moved on to a different company, which is managed much better and aligned with normal business practices and a way to treat people properly, and realizing what a blessing it is to have something like that is pretty good. But then my parents are at end of life, and they're making just horrible decisions where they're causing the siblings, us children, to have to make, horrific, gut wrenching decisions, to the point where I had lunch or breakfast with my sister and my brother-in-law. We're all deeply involved in this saga with my mom, who's terminally ill, and my dad's behavior, and things are so complicated and so convoluted that we actually were sitting at this table, and I looked at him and I said, you know what, guys, I don't even know how to pray about this. And the three of us we're all Christian people. I'm Messianic, and my brother-in-law is more of a non-denominational guy. My sister is Catholic, somewhat Catholic, non-practicing, but we are all still God-fearing and praying people, and we all agreed. We're just like, I don't even know what to say about this stuff. I'm just lost. And they said thank you, because they were in the same predicament. And the usual response here, this is kind of a really long prelude to my message today. Usual response among us in Messianic or Churches of God or whatever is to say, oh, it's God's will. It's God, just pray that God's will be done. But you know what? God's will is going to be done. But we're supposed to pray. And we're supposed to have specifics when we pray. And all the days of our lives are recorded in the book of life before we were born. But we don't get to read that book. We're moving from page to page right now. Maybe at the end of the age, Yahweh will let us all read the book. But we don't know the book. He knows the book. We don't know the book. We don't get to read it. What I want to show today, that we don't know what's on the next page of the book. And not only is it okay for us to pray, it's expected for us to pray with specificity. We're not just robots who are walking through a predetermined life. We have predestination and we have free will, and both things complement each other. Our decisions allow us to move forward in life. Yahweh just knows what we were going to decide before we decided. And we're made in the image of Yahweh. That doesn't just mean physicality, because he doesn't really have physicality anyway. We know that his son does. Yeshua had a physicality and has a physicality, and we're made in that image. But it doesn't mean just physical, it means emotionally. Yahweh has emotions and feelings and worries. Even though he knows the beginning from the end, he still does get upset and frustrated. And we know this from reading the scriptures. It's not a new thing. And I really want to let everybody know that it's okay to pray for specific stuff, even if you don't get it, even if Yahweh's will is something else entirely. You don't really know that his will, and it's okay, because he wants us to express ourselves to him in a prayer, in deep prayer, so that he knows how we're feeling and he knows what we're thinking. And this is a bi-directional relationship we have with our Creator. So to really hammer this home here at the beginning, I want to switch to the scriptures just to show that this is true in the most stark terms. Is Luke 22:39-46, and let's talk about Yeshua. It says, and he came out and proceeded, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples also followed him. When he arrived at the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and began to pray, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. Now an angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him. And being in agony, he was praying very fervently, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling upon the ground. When he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping from sorrow. and said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you may not enter into temptation." So this is showing that Yeshua did not want to go through what he went through for us. That it was a difficult, with much pain and agony, he had to go through the crucifixion. And he knew exactly what was about to happen. He was about to get betrayed by one of his closest friends, his Talmudim. He didn't want it to spread to others. That's why he says, pray that you don't enter into temptation. The temptation that you jump on the bandwagon with Judas. This part of this crucifixion, a big part of it, is the emotional trauma that Yeshua went through to be betrayed by one of his right-hand men, Judas, to be betrayed by his countrymen, and to have to die slowly on the cross while being jeered at from people who were supposed to be righteous. And he didn't want to. As I read this, he is asking Yahweh to take the trial away, but not to take it away because he asked for it. So it's very, very kind of threading the needle thing here. He's saying, not my will, but yours be done. Meaning, if it's your will that Yeshua not have to go through this, then don't make Yeshua go through this. He's not, because Yeshua had incredible sway with the creator of the universe, being his only begotten son. He said earlier in the ministry, don't you think I could bring legions of angels? And he could. At any given time, he could have said, okay, these guys aren't worth it. And, or what I think is one of the biggest miracles is that while he was up on that cross, that he didn't get mad and pull himself down from the cross and slay them all, because he could have done all of that. He could have said, Yahweh, they're not worth it. Yahweh, this isn't worth it. But he didn't do any of that because he followed through to the end. And just understand that there could have been a different outcome coming. Yeshua didn't, I don't know if he totally knew the outcome or if he knew some of the outcome or not, but remember, one of the prophecies of Yeshua's sacrifice is Abraham and Isaac. Abraham was willing to kill Isaac. At the last second, Yahweh substituted a ram. It's entirely possible that Yahweh could have substituted something else for Yeshua's sacrifice and said, you know what? Now I know you're willing to go through with it. That's enough. He could have done something else, but he didn't do that. Yeshua actually had to die. And he was sweating like blood. He was in a traumatic state. He was about to be physically abused, betrayed by his countrymen, and slowly executed. One of the most terrifying parts of this is that he was about to become completely alone and helpless in a world that hated him. And he didn't want to do it. But he knew that it was Yahweh's will, and if he didn't want to do it, but he did it. Since it was Yahweh's will, he still went through with it, and praise God that he did, because our sins have now been forgiven. But just understand in this passage that it was okay for Yeshua to not want to go through with it, but to still go through with it. And he is our example in all things. And we have, that was his humanity side, and we have big time humanity side of our own. So let's go through some other examples of where emotional responses are appropriate. It's John 7:27-29. However, we know where this man is from, but whenever the Messiah may come, no one knows where he is from. Then Yeshua cried out in the temple teaching and saying, you both know me and know where I am from, and I have not come of myself, but he who sent me is true, whom you do not know. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. He's literally frustrated with these guys. They were claiming that when the Messiah came, that he was just going to pop up and come out of nowhere. And the fact that they knew that they knew that Yeshua was from Mary and Joseph and Bethlehem, that disqualified him from being the Messiah. They were being intentionally thick-headed. They were purposely not getting it. Because while they knew where he came from, they didn't know where he got his training, and they didn't know where he got his power, and they didn't know where he got his authority. So he didn't pop up out of nowhere. And he was really frustrated that they were purposely saying ludicrous things to try to sway doctrine to disqualify him from being the Messiah. And so, and this part can get a little tangled up too, because he was purposely deceptive about his identity and his authority at quite a few times. But when they asked him, when John sent a disciple and said, are you the Messiah? He didn't reply with a secret code word. He didn't reply with a special signature or a ring. He replied and said, look at these things that are happening. People are being resurrected. The blind can see. The lame can walk. The deaf can hear. Go talk about the deeds, because the deeds testify of the Messiah. And so these intelligentsia, these Jews, these learned men in the temple should have known, based upon the things that are happening, that wait a minute, this guy is anointed. He is Yahweh's anointed one. He was performing miracles that no other prophet had ever performed, and then some, feeding thousands of people. And they were just being thick-headed about his identity. So this is a frustrating thing. And I'm not saying that I'm in any way, shape, or form on par with Yeshua, but I was in a little debate with somebody online. She's a Sabbath keeper who didn't understand the holy days, and she thought that the day of the Lord was Sabbath. And we all, those of us who've gone a little bit further in our studies, have adopted the holy days in the Torah, understand the day of the Lord is a reference to Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, an annual Sabbath, and it is also a reference to a singular point in time when Yeshua returns on the day that no one knows, which is another kind of a idiomatic way of referring to Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets. And so I showed her the Micah scriptures that says the great terrible day of the Lord is a singular event. And then she replied back with something from Acts where it actually said that that Sabbath is not the day of the Lord, that it's some other day. But she was reading it as if it was supporting her position, and I'm like, your scripture doesn't support your position, and she still stuck with it. Now she did, I was a little bit not really frustrated. I was just kind of shaking my head, and I'm staying engaged with the person to actually start, the process of getting her, exposed to a better understanding. Not that her understanding is bad or anything, but it is a little bit frustrating, and it's kind of akin to what Yeshua is saying right here. Is these guys know the scriptures? They know they're looking at the Messiah, but for whatever reason, they're refusing to accept it, and he's not happy about that. But I'm not saying that we have a license to be frustrated. We don't have it's not okay for us to be angry people, which is one of the themes that I want to get across today, is that we have emotions, but today's a period of time where people are being stuck in rage mode for a very long time, and just constantly angry, and getting out the pitchforks and the torches. We're going to take them all out, right? That's not a healthy way to be whatsoever. So, let's look at another one here. Although Moses was 120 years old when he died, this is Deuteronomy 34:7-8, if you're just listening to this. Although Moses was 120 years old when he died, his eye was not dim, nor his vigor abated. So the sons of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses came to an end. So we're talking about mourning people, Mourning. And Moses was not decrepit when he died. This is interesting that he was 120 and didn't look a day over 60. He was still out there walking around. His eyes were good. His senses were good. He was strong. He was a vigor. He was a vigor. And his death was prophesied because he struck the rock twice. Sometimes I read that and I think it's because he struck the rock at all. But at either rate, he did get upset and whacked the rock, and his punishment was that he was not going to enter the land. Everybody knew he was not going to enter the land. Perhaps they didn't know that he was going to die outside the land right before they crossed, but everybody knew he wasn't going to live forever. And it was still okay to mourn his loss. And this is part of that thing where we shrug and we say, "Oh, it's Yahweh's will, and nobody lives forever," and we're just supposed to brush it off. But no, you don't have to brush it off. You need to properly mourn and have some tears and have some sorrow and remember the good times and remember the bad and miss people. Even though Moses' death was prophesied, he wasn't going to enter the land. It wasn't just fine for him to mourn the loss. The entire nation mourned 30 days. Not just his immediate family either. And we tie this into the Messiah. Because the Messiah commanded us to remember his death until he comes again. That includes understanding the gravity, the emotional toll of his betrayal, the toll it took on him, the toll it took on his believers, his followers. It also includes the joy of having him be resurrected and come back. Because keep in mind, he died 3 days and 3 nights, he's back. Yahweh resurrects him. Then he leaves, saying he's coming back. There's a pattern there. We have to be missing him, that he's not here, but looking forward to the day he comes back, which will be a joyous day. When he comes back, he's going to bring legions of angels. It's going to be terrifying. And we're probably going to be a little scared. But when we realize it's him, and he's coming back to rescue us from evil, we're going to be joyous. We're going to be happy about that. And in his remembering his death, I'm always hearkened back to those ladies who, while being figuratively kicked in the gut at his death, mourning and just in complete sorrow at the death of Yeshua, they still had their wits about them to get the embalming done and go to that too. Those ladies kept putting one foot in front of the other, and I think there's a lesson in that for us, that we manage our emotions to the degree that we can continue to move in the right direction. These emotions are important, but we have to be careful to manage our emotions, just as Yahweh does. Because Yahweh can get angry, and he has, and he could get angry enough to just end the whole thing. But he doesn't do it. And that's our example as well. So here's a little sliver of advice from the Apostle Paul. This is, therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth each one of you with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. Paul gives us the balance here while quoting the Psalms. He says, be angry. And I'm going to extend that to be sad, be mad, be mournful, be lonely, be grievous, be bothered. Insert any emotion here. but don't sin. Don't let it take over and give an opportunity for Satan to enter in. Our society is geared to making emotional decisions because emotions are so incredibly powerful. Uh, if you think about marketing campaigns today, when you look at the television picture, they're advertising a pickup truck. I'll use my pickup truck example again. And the pickup truck is technologically advanced. It's a half ton. It gets 25 miles to the gallon. It can tow 10,000 pounds, and it's got all suspension that makes you think you're riding on air, and it's got all these statistics, these good features. But they kind of insert the features while showing you how nice it is to have this truck, how beautiful it is, how it's climbing up a hill to a perfect meadow where the family's going to have a picnic and they're camping, or it's on the beach, or it's towing some big log and making the guy who owns it the envy of all the construction guys. Or maybe the truck has got these luxurious features that they make you kind of desire it. And so they angle with that. And years ago we purchased a new pickup truck, which we've since sold, but we wanted certain features and a certain price, and we sent it out to the dealers, and they sent us back, come on down, right? So we go to one dealer, we walk in, and they say, what color do you want? What color do you want? Well, we didn't care about the color of the car. We literally, my wife and I did no, that was like the last thing on the list. It's not like the car is going to be any type of ugly color. Manufacturers don't make ugly cars. They make things that make you want them. It's going to be attractive. It's going to be a new vehicle. It's going to be a beautiful thing. So we didn't even think about the color. There's well, we got a blue one and a black one for you, and we test drove these cars, and they were not trucks. They were the most luxurious vehicles you could imagine, with humongous displays and leather, uh, cooled and heated seats, and all sorts of accoutrement that were, I'm like, I can't believe we can afford these trucks. I clearly told them what I wanted to pay for a pickup. And so we go out, and they say, okay, well, like those can't possibly cost what we're asking, what we're offering. Oh, they said, oh yeah, that's true. They're $10,000 to $15,000 more than what you're looking for. But didn't you like them? Aren't they really nice? So these guys were using our emotions to try to get us to make a poor financial decision, and we didn't take the bait. We ultimately walked away, and then did find a dealer that did sell us a truck with a lot of that nice stuff in it for the right price. And that was a huge blessing. It allowed us to take a bunch of, go to Saco, tow trailers, and it allowed us to take some big trips, and it was a beautiful thing. And it was silver, but we didn't care. But the other part of the emotions is if you think about marketing campaigns on television, where they're showing you, if you take this new vitamin, this vitamin that's made out of only vegetables, that you're gonna be 20 years younger. They don't tell you that. They make you think it. They show people in their 60s or 70s taking these pills and saying, "Oh, my life changed." And then they put them in a field with a Labrador Retriever, or swings with the grandkids, and they're trying to say that, hey, if you take these pills, it's a fountain of youth. That you're going to feel so much younger. You're going to do this and that. They never actually tell you that the pill hasn't been proven to do anything, but they're trying to get you tied into that emotion to make that emotional decision to get on their website, buy their pills, give them your info. Maybe they sign you up for some automatic send thing. And before you know it, you're taking these pills that are just, hopefully they are helping some people, but they're doing it on emotion instead of facts. And it's bad because we all know that the worst decisions we've made in our lives generally happen when we were not in the right emotional state, or we made an emotional decision to purchase something that was a little bit beyond our means, or a little bit out of our reach. Or even worse, we've made impulsive decisions about, huge life changes and stuff. So on that note, let's look at the worst emotional decision that has ever happened, ever, in the world. Ready? John 19:13 through 16. Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Yeshua out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, Behold your king. So they cried out, Away with him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priest answered, We have no king but Caesar. So he then handed him over to be crucified. Yeshua was crucified based on the emotionally charged outrage of the chief priests, who not only crucified an innocent man, killed the Messiah, they rejected the lineage of David and their entire identity as children of God by putting themselves under the authority of Caesar. This is appalling sin. And that is what the death of the Messiah is supposed to show us, is the starkest contrasts between good and evil that we could ever see. Rejecting David's line is rejecting Yahweh. And they wanted Yeshua dead because they had been spun up into a fit of rage. Many of them repented in Acts 2. They were cut to the quick, but they did it. And they needed forgiveness big time for that. And this is bringing me to modern times as well, because we have this thing that's going on in our society to for people like us to be terrified and frightened and fearful and outraged. And we tend to listen to these commentators who every day are ramping up the rage and ramping up the outrage. And I listened to one of them back in 2008. I had been listening. My job had me driving around a lot. I had a driving territory. I was for years. I had been behind the wheel of the car for 40, 50, 60,000 miles a year, listening to satellite radio. And I was listening to one guy named Glenn Beck, and he used to be really, really funny. So you'd get the news and you'd have a hearty laugh every day. And then when he went on to to CNN, all of a sudden he got really dark, and telling us that rampant inflation is coming, rampant deflation is coming. You need to buy all the shoes your kids are ever going to have because you're not going to be able to get them. And I noticed that I was listening to this guy every day. He started out as being really funny and pulling lots of pranks, and he had moved into a pretty dark place, and I found my behavior changing. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think we all should have the ability um, to survive a few weeks at least. If the power goes out or if something happens to the supply chain, because it has happened to the supply chain. We should be self-sufficient to a degree, but not to the point of trying to separate ourselves from society. The scriptures in no way, shape, or form support believers separating from society. We are supposed to be in society. But that doesn't mean you have to live in an urban city and have your life be at risk. Obviously you can live somewhere safe and have a nice life, but I was listening to this guy, and it got darker and darker and darker until there was an election that he should have liked. In 2008, there was an election that flipped the House of Representatives to people that this commentator liked. And the day of that was the last day I listened to him. He was on there saying, "Well, this isn't enough. Oh, it's bad. Oh, this is horrible. The Republicans aren't going to be enough." And he was just finding the cloud and the silver lining. And I realized that it was his shtick to keep his audience terrified and scared and tuned in. And I turned it off, and I haven't been back since, because I am not living like that. For starters, there are other emotions besides fear and besides outrage. There are love, joy, peace, long suffering, happiness. I've got a good family. I've got a great wife. I've got a nice house. I've got a good career. We've got the assembly. We live in Kansas City. The positives far outweigh the negatives. And at that moment in time, 2008, I said, I'm not listening to this guy or his type, because that shtick of keeping everybody scared and outraged does work, and it gets a lot of people make a lot of money off of that. And I'm just not interested. And I hope you're not either, because we're not living for today. We're supposed to be outraged about things that are outrageous. Mass shootings is bad, horrible, 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 horrible. And we should be mourning right along with the victims of that. But there's good things, because the Supreme Court just overturned Roe versus Wade, and the amount of babies being murdered in this country is gone down dramatically. There's good and there's bad in life. And we are supposed to celebrate the good as well as mourn for the bad. Until Revelation 21:3-4. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be among them, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no longer any death. There will no longer be any mourning, there will crying or pain. The first things have passed away. See, there's going to be a point in history where the negative emotions won't be a thing anymore. Whether they won't be around, because maybe we will still have the capacity to be sad, we just won't have anything to be sad about. Or whether that we will be changed to where we don't even have the ability to be sad or cry anymore. I don't know. But today, our feelings and emotions matter a lot. How we react to bad things shows Yahweh our character, and hopefully we are reflecting back his character in our prayers, in our sorrow. Our emotions are real and they're powerful, but we need to keep them in check so they do not drive us to do things we shouldn't do. But we also need to embrace them and understand they are normal. It's normal to be sad. It's normal to be mad. It's normal to feel depressed. If it goes on for too long, then you do need to seek help. But occasional and having emotions throughout the day and throughout your life is real. And we know that it's normal to pray Yah's will be done. But it's also okay to say, you know what, Yahweh, if you could please, find another way or something. It's okay to ask him for personal stuff as well. You may get it, you may not get it. His will is always going to be done. But he also wants to hear from us and hear from our hearts. So thank you for listening today. This went a little longer than I intended. Please drop by the website, firstcenturychristianity.net. Sign up to get on the list to get these emails. Like and share this wherever you may be listening or watching it. And may Yahweh bless you and keep you in the name of his son, Yeshua. Have a blessed week.